This week we'll get into the second set of readings in the essayists section of Crafting Truth. We'll read excerpts from Alice Walker, Scott Russell Sanders, and Andre Dubusse. While you're reading, I want you to pay attention to the way the writers build a scene. You should be thinking about the essay you're going to workshop during the second half of the semester and how you're going to build your scenes. Watch the moves the writers make this week. Notice if they're writing in present or past tense. Notice when they go from description and detail to exposition. As always, have your notebook close by to take notes on what you notice, what you love, and what you question. We'll look first at Alice Walker and her excerpt from Beauty, When the Other Dancer is the Self. Walker writes in present tense, and that gives an immediate energy to the work. However, as you read her, do you wish for that more traditional essay writer move, which is to have a narrator who comes to the piece, especially when it's told from a child's point of view, with the wisdom and reflection of time passing? Writing in the present tense can be tricky. Does Alice Walker put it off? One more thing I want you to pay attention to is the way Walker uses repetition in her essay. Ballinger calls it a pattern of emphasis. How can repetition add emotional weight to an essay, and when can it distract? Do you think the way Walker uses the repetition of the phrases, "You did not change," or "Now that I've raised my head," gives weight to the essay or to the telling, or not? Why? Do you use repetition in your writing? Why do you do it? And why do you stay away from it? I encourage you to try it this week. Build a scene and use the repetition of certain details or certain lines and see what it does. Does it make it resonate more, or does it make it seem too obvious? Scott Russell Sanders, our second reading for this week, he wrote, "For me, the writing of a personal essay is like finding my way through a forest without being quite sure of what game I am chasing." The pleasure in writing an essay, and when the writing is any good, the pleasure of reading it, comes from this dodging and leaping, this movement of the mind. I love that idea of following an essay until it reveals itself to you, but is that too abstract or too much of a leap of faith to let the essay reveal itself, however slowly? Are you willing, as a reader, to go along with the dodging and leaping? One of the most powerful moments in the essay is when Sanders quotes his father, who said, "If you're going to cut a piece of wood, you owe it to the tree to cut it straight." Do you think lines like that come after the essay, or are they the impetus for writing the essay? When you're writing this week, pay close attention to lines you hear people speak. Write down the most compelling lines in a notebook. I was walking the beach this summer, and I walked by a man and a woman who from 30 feet away looked very much like a couple. And as I passed, I heard the man say, "I don't think there's anything else I can do to get you to fall in love with me." That was enough of a start for me to start imagining their whole story. One thing I want you to pay attention to this week is detail. How do these writers use details to their advantage? Do you ever feel like it's too much? Sanders explains with an unwavering eye what his father's tools look like. Did it ever feel like you were getting bogged down in the details? Did the details feel like they were leading somewhere compelling? How do we start to make that writerly choice of which details to use and which to leave out? Andre Dubusse is our final reading for this week. I love him, and I fell in love with his fiction, and then when I read Broken Vessels, I fell in love with his nonfiction as well. He was in a terrible accident that left him in a wheelchair, and Broken Vessels was his way of grappling with this new body on the page, and it's true and raw and heartbreaking. Something I always think about when I read Dubusse is how close he comes to risking sentimentality, but how that never happens, and a moment, like the one described in the excerpt, could be too sentimental or too cliché, ends up being just right, and reveals the vulnerability of this man and the frustration he feels in his new body. When you're reading him this week, I want you to think about the idea of writing something utterly ordinary and how you give something that people have written about for a long, long time charge and depth. How does Dubusse do this? I look forward to reading your observations in this week's discussion board posts. Happy reading and writing.